more and more people in Europe moving more in the orbit of where Zelensky is. Now, Zelensky's been saying from the very beginning of this war, I'm fighting for you. This is for Europe, not just for us. We're like the front lines for you. So you're helping us help you, all this kind of stuff. And it's always been nonsense. And usually I just rolled my eyes at it. But here in the last few months or so, it seems like more and more people in Europe are really starting to come around to say, no, really, I think maybe he's right. Gary, you have the one with Donald Tusk. Is that handy?
I want to say this very clearly, and I would like my compatriots in Poland to hear these words. This war is also our war. We hear it often, both here in Warsaw and everywhere else on earth. We often hear people saying, no, this isn't our war, it shouldn't concern us. Let them kill themselves there or solve their own problems. It doesn't concern us. We don't want to pay. We don't want to sacrifice our money, our time, and especially the lives of our soldiers. But we have to be aware, and it's not about whether someone loves Ukraine, or whether someone has good or bad experiences with Ukraine. This isn't a question of simple, obvious and necessary solidarity with a country that was attacked by an aggressor. It's a question about the security and survival of the entire Western civilization.
Well, okay, I get it why Zelensky would say that, because he's doing everything he can, is desperate to draw you in on his side. I get that. But it's interesting and weird that he's in the middle of that comment right there, literally mocking the concept, which should be an article of faith. Like, well, we don't want to get our soldiers killed. We don't want to have our countries being blown up, etc. Good. But then why are you literally mocking that idea? That, I mean, do you want your soldiers to die, etc.? I mean, and then he just tags it out. It's the Western civilization. I mean, what the hell are you talking about? Where is the real threat from Russia to do that? I mean, you on other times will literally mock the Russian military and say, look, they've been trying for, what is it? I guess in really focused terms, for most of this year to take Pokrovsk, that one reasonably sized city in the east, kind of the central hinge on the entire Russian offensive. And they have made some success in it, and they've made some progress. They're even in the since our last video that we made here, they've made more progress. They're moving more into the internal part of the city. The same is true in Kupiansk in the north. They're moving further into that city, but it's still, they haven't gotten them. And now you want to say that Western civilization is at risk from a country that has successfully taken about 1% in the last, I think it's like 18 months inside Ukraine, where there's only one army fighting? I mean, there's no rational logic to that. And so you literally keep bumping up the possibility of having a conflict with Russia, and forget about whether Russia would be able to defeat you. But if you get into a war with them, it could all too easily go nuclear. And even if it only stayed conventional, why invite your soldiers to die and missiles now to be flying? Those videos that Gary was showing you a minute ago from overnight, all these things burning in Kiev. You want Warsaw to be that way? You want your cities to be the same things? You want that to be burning? You want these to be images that are coming from your country? For nothing. Why would you even toy with that? And it's not just Poland, because also Germany, France, UK have said similar things this summer. With the I think it was the French version of their chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff said, yeah, they could be coming for us. Germany's saying, yeah, we're going to move some of our troops even into the Baltic areas there, because they could be coming for us next. We could be at war with them coming up shortly. You have Mark Rutte saying we could be at war with Russia within 3 to 5 to 7 years. We have to be building up and all this kind of stuff. Why would you be talking such violent rhetoric that can only have one effect on the other side, to make them feel you're coming after them and that you're preparing, literally, physically preparing for war with Russia? And weirdly enough, I didn't have it cut time, but Dmitry Medvedev, who's usually a firebrand on the Russian side, actually had something posted today where he said, listen, we need to be careful with this talk here, because he goes, first of all, I don't know why people keep saying that we're going to attack somewhere. We don't have any interest in attacking. Why would we want to go into what he called decrepit Europe? We've got everything we need in our country here. We don't want to send our army to take over Europe. And why would we even want to? What's the value of doing that? So they have the stated claim that they don't want to. They don't have the military capacity to do so, and they have the demonstration that almost the best they can do in 3.5 years of war is a pretty small amount on the eastern side of Ukraine. So why would we want to go down that path? Now, he also continued to say, I don't think that the Europeans are going to do this either. And he listed several reasons why he thought, which are pretty logical. One would hope that he's right. How weird that we're saying that about Dmitry Medvedev, that we in the West hope he's right, that the Europeans actually aren't going to do this. But then he ends it with a pretty sobering and also problematic statement that, however, you could still get a mistake. You could still get an error, an accident, something that could spawn a war that could then go nuclear. Weapons of mass destruction was the phrase that he used. Why do we want to even entertain that possibility? There's nothing to gain here, folks. There's nothing for the West to gain. There's nothing for the West to fear. We don't have to fear that Russia is going to roll across Western Europe. They have demonstrated that the way modern warfare is fought, if you're paying any attention at all, you can make it so costly for the invading side that they're not going to want to do it. And as the Ukraine side is, and the reason why Russia is still willing to pay that price is because it's an existential threat on their border, which is an active hostility and has been for quite a long time from the West. And I'm talking back to 2014. But that doesn't exist outside of Ukraine, and there's no reason for Russia to do that. And they've not stated anything to that regard as well. So let's stop being dumb and stupid. And now, fortunately, everybody in Europe is not this way. We've mentioned many times Slovakian leader Robert Fico and also Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orbán, who this weekend got together actually, and they were reminiscing about how they were sucked into World Wars I and II against their wishes, and they didn't want to get that. And they said, that's not going to happen again. Here's how Viktor Orbán put it.
Ladies and gentlemen, we did not want either of these wars. Neither the Hungarians nor the Slovaks wanted to participate in either of the world wars. Yet, we were sent to the front, and our lives were turned upside down for imperial interests. With the rebuilding of the bridge, both nations expressed simultaneously that they do not want any more bridge-destroying wars in Europe. When I was here for the first time, the Commissioner for the Expansion of the European Union, Verheugen, was also here, and the three of us expressed that we wanted to join a Europe that is a guarantor of peace. I suggest that we savour the words as it would be about a Europe. However, the world has changed a lot since then. Just like the old empires that oppressed us, now the European Union is also a warlike project.
It's so embarrassing that you have both Slovakia and Hungary talking about the warmongers not being Russia, but being the European Union. The European Union is supposed to be an economic grouping that benefits all of the people inside. They have common financial processes, etc. But it's turned into almost more warlike and war hawkish than NATO itself. I mean, Ursula von der Leyen and Kaja Kallas, the chief diplomat, I mean, you would think that they were leading a war-fighting organization instead of an economic formation. That's almost all they talk about, or that's the primary thing. They keep going back to that instead of talking about economic things and it just being common sense about what can bring security and peace by ending the war. But instead, they just seem hell-bent on keeping the risk up. Now, whether they mean it or not, that's another question that we can answer. But their actions keep it alive and keep pushing right on the edge of whether they're going to go into by talking, boisterous things about how they're going to shoot down Russian MiGs, et cetera. And of course, over the weekend, the Russians said, wouldn't recommend it. And if you do, there will be an immediate response. Don't find out. See, this is the thing. You're toying with something that could all too easily expand out that nobody actually wants, or that nobody should want. Certainly the Russians don't want. We shouldn't want it. And that's what should motivate us, is to do what makes some sense. Now, if it was only the Europeans and the European Unions and the Kaja Kallases and the Mark Ruttes, et cetera, that would be one thing. Unfortunately, whatever Trump says, some of his most senior advisors and people who are in his inner circle are saying some of the same things and making the same dumb comments that people in Europe are. So unfortunately, I can't just blame Europe. We have to look on our own side here. Let's look first of all at what former Secretary of State Mike Pompeo said this weekend.
President Trump has given Vladimir Putin every chance to settle this out, to find a peaceful solution, and Vladimir Putin has rejected every one of those efforts. You saw a really diligent try in Anchorage in Alaska to get a good outcome for the world, and Putin just thumbed his nose. And so what I think you're seeing is President Trump saying, fine, we can do this a different way. No one should forget, and it's not a perfect parallel. He gave the Iranians a similar warning, and then we had 12 days of hell rain down on them. I think Vladimir Putin will have to come see that expanding this war will be proved to be a mistake, that the Europeans will do their part and the United States will do its, and that in the end, Putin has got to decide that the costs exceed the benefits, and I think President Trump is prepared to make that so.
Russia needs to wake up. I mean, he's talking like the United States is a parent and Russia is a wayward child, and they're not. In fact, if anything, probably the power imbalance now is on Russia's favor militarily over us. And he doesn't seem to recognize that. And it's more than just a little disturbing that you want to say it's not a perfect parallel with Iran. You shouldn't even be having it in the same conversation. Iran is not Russia. Russia is not as limited as Iran. Russia has the largest nuclear stockpiles in the world. They have a very large and effective air force. They have a navy. And even though the Black Sea Fleet has been hit with a lot, don't compare the rest of the Russian Navy to that port right there, because there's some significant local issues that are involved there. And most of the experts that I've talked to, the naval experts, have said it's a mistake to say that Russia has no navy. They're not capable. They do have one, and they are capable. All of these things Iran doesn't even have. But when you're trying to make the illusion that just like Trump was playing hardball with Iran, and when they didn't play with him, when they didn't follow his instructions, then they saw they had a 12-day war and got put back in their place. And then he says, Trump, at the end of that, he says Trump can use some other stronger methods to Russia too. What do you mean then? If you don't mean that the United States might use force on Russia, what do you mean? And why would you want to bring up that example unless that's exactly what you meant? And I don't know. Maybe Mike Pompeo is so foolish that he actually thinks that saying tough words like that and then making the connection between what Trump said and what, by the way, not what Trump did, but what Israel did. I think they were using him for that, but we'll talk about that this afternoon. But if you think that that's going to scare Russia, that's going to make Russia go, oh, darn, look what they've done in the past. Well, we can't follow that. I mean, you're dangerously misinformed. And the problem is, I mean, he keeps saying this, Pompeo, on Fox News. We know for sure, obviously, Trump watches Fox News on a daily basis, but also Mike Pompeo probably has direct access should he want to do so. How much he does is unknown right now. He's not exactly a close confidant, but he's still in the mix, obviously. The fact that they keep putting him on there here. Of even more concern is the vice president, J.D. Vance, who also says that, Russia just has to wake up.
Unfortunately, what we've seen over the last couple of weeks, the Russians have refused to sit down with any bilateral meetings with the Ukrainians. They've refused to sit down with any trilateral meetings where the president or some other member of the administration could sit down with the Russians. But the Russians have got to wake up and accept reality here. A lot of people are dying. They don't have a lot to show for it. How many more people are they willing to lose? How many more people are they willing to kill? Our attitude here is we're going to keep on working for peace, and we hope the Russians actually wake up to the reality on the ground.
Yeah, you hope that they wake up to your reality on the ground. But when you use that rhetorical statement, how many more people are they willing to lose? How many? As many as it takes. I mean, they are very clear on that they have changed their tactics in the last few months, especially, and they've been doing it really this whole year, but even more so in the last couple of months, to minimize friendly casualties and maximize their enemy casualties in Ukraine. So they're ramping up their firepower, and everything from glide bombs to artillery to all different categories of the first-person view of the tactical drones, the strategic drones and operational that are flying across the country, the missiles that are going in there, and then the direct fire even at the front. And they're showing they will continue to do that, because for Russia, it's an existential issue. For us, it's whatever, 10,000 miles away. So it's not the same for us, even for most of Europe, other than like Slovakia and Hungary, who are right there on the front lines, and they very much don't want this to go on. That should be also a marker here that the people who were closest up there, other than Poland, who has historic hatred for Russia, in some cases justifiably so, but they're kind of an outlier. But even they're not willing to, other than rhetorically, use a lot of military forces, because they know they're going to be the first ones in the line of fire, and they don't. I don't think anyway that they actually want a conflict. But we've got to. He said that the vice president there, they need to wake up. We need to wake up. And again, this term of wake up to reality, whose reality are you talking about? Because it doesn't appear to be the objective reality. It appears to be the preference people want. So that's why I say it's one thing for former Secretary of State Mike Pompeo, but now here's the Vice President of the United States kind of echoing what he had said there. And if there's any other possibility, I mentioned at the top of this that True Social that President Trump put out a week ago, saying that, well, Ukraine, it's now possible for them to go back to their 1991 borders. So we talked about what a lot of that might have meant in the past. Maybe that was just a rhetorical way for Trump to walk away. But we also have to recognize and consider the possibility that maybe he actually thinks that's true. And we have his hand-picked emissary, General Keith Kellogg, who also this weekend continued to reinforce the idea that Russia is losing.
I think what's happened is the constant information he gets, which is really good, from the intelligence agencies, from Secretary of State, all the way down the line, kind of shows him that Russia is not winning this war. If they were winning this war, they'd be in Kyiv, they'd be in Odessa, they'd be over the Dnieper River. That we added 2 new NATO allies. One of them, Finland, had doubled the size of the border. The Russians have to protect. We added Sweden. This is where I think they have an opportunity to challenge Russia much more aggressively if they pick to do it, and they get the weapon systems to do so.
Challenge Russia much more aggressively and get the weapons to do so. So he's talking about expanding the war. Now, the other side had been accused, the Western side had been accused in Russia of expanding the war. In fact, even I believe it was Vice President Vance had said, that if they want to expand, we want to keep them from expanding. The Russians not trying to expand it. They're trying to end it. But now we're talking about expanding it. And you just have to ask the question, where is this going? Well, since we know, and this circles all the way back to the beginning of this episode, we know that our defense industrial base is insufficient for what's going on right now. We know for sure that our stockpiles are way below what they should be, definitely what they were when this war opened. And because of how many weapons we've used in the Middle East, and now there's another $6 billion package on the table for Israel that we may want to. And of course, they're using a lot of these same packages. You had 2 new packages, $500 million each in the last week or so from the United States to Ukraine, that specifically includes interceptor missiles and long-range fires. So how do you keep doing that when you know that it would take, even by according to that Wall Street Journal piece here, you're talking 2026, 2027 before you can start to see any results? If they started today, if they got funding, if they started having contracts and whatnot, you're talking a couple of years away before you could start to really see any increase in that. But you're talking right now, like, let's have a conflict potentially now, for the Ukraine side to go now, meaning the only way that they're going to be able to expand it is, General Kellogg said there, if they get the weapons. Well, they sure aren't going to be able to make them, not in that kind of category. They're only going to get them from one place, and that's primarily from the United States. I don't care who pays for them at this point. I care about having the capacity, and we'll see how many the Europeans come up with on their own. But you're talking about expanding the war. And there should be, any rational thinking person should understand from history that when you try to compel and coerce Russia, that the likelihood, the strong likelihood, is that you're going to get them to double down on him, pay whatever price, make whatever sacrifices necessary to win. And they have done it over the centuries. Now, I've heard some commentary just over this weekend from the Western leaders who are trying to claim the other, because they say, well, they go back to the, I guess the 1904 and the 1917 revolutions that took place in Russia specifically. And they say, yeah, because it was hardship, they'd lost a lot of people, and maybe that'll happen again. And certainly that did happen in 1917. But you got to look at the context. That was in the middle of a world war that they were losing and had lost 5 million people because of incompetence at the national level. They had been doing terrible on the battlefield, and they had a lot of things that historically had been piled up on top of that. The Tsar was at an incredibly low approval rating. I don't think they actually had approval ratings at that time, but he was incredibly unpopular. And now that you don't have anything similar to that at all, the conditions are radically different than that. And Putin does have somewhere between around an 80% approval rating. I think it's rarely dipped even below that. And now it's hovering between 80, 84, depending on what month they're looking at here. So he's not unpopular. There aren't 5 million casualties on the Russian side. And they do view this as an existential threat. They view this as it's the West writ large against Russia, just using the cudgel of Ukraine. And they're not going to stop fighting because they feel like their future's at risk. They're not blaming Putin. They're blaming the West. So to base your hope that increasing the firepower from Ukraine into it, and by the way, they're also considering using, and now they're actually asking, the Ukraine side is asking the United States for cruise missiles, Tomahawk missiles from the United States. And apparently we are considering giving those too. That just doesn't make any sense to me. Why you still want to expand the capability and try adding one more thing. Remember, it was going to be the ATACMS. That was going to be the deal. We get those long-range fires. That was going to make a difference. Do you ever hear about ATACMS anymore? These long-range fires, they didn't do hardly anything at the time. And then it was going to be, it was F-16s. That was the real one. So we gave them F-16s, and you didn't hear anything after that except for when the F-16s get shot down or when they crash or something. So it didn't make any difference. And they're still trying to, we want more. And there's some other people have volunteered. Some other NATO countries have said, we'll give you a squadron of them. So, but they don't have the manpower to use them. And they have the same problems that their own fleets have, is that they can still be shot down and they're not some magic wonder weapons. And now you think the cruise missile, well, listen, this has additional problems because it is a missile that has nuclear capability. And do you really want to give a Tomahawk cruise missile to Ukraine and just hope that Russia doesn't think, what if this is a nuclear tipped one? Well, let's just let it land and then find out. I mean, you put Russia in the position to where they may calculate, we can't risk it. We have to return fire with nuclear weapons now while we can. It's just absurd to play with that kind of fire. And again, I have to tell you this. There is no upside for us. There is no potential value in any of this because there is no rational, logical line to draw that says the acceleration of firepower and the expansion of the capabilities is going to cause Russia to do something against their national interest. It's irrational to think that way. And yet that's the way we're all thinking. So all I can hope is that all these advisors are wrong and that President Trump will, when push comes to shove, not shove back in a way that's going to get this war expanded, because it does look like that the Russians who clearly, and even through Dmitry Medvedev, don't want a war with the West and are doing whatever they can to end it, but they will not compromise on their border with Ukraine and having a hostile military alliance on it. They won't compromise with that, but they don't want to expand it elsewhere. Let's just put that to the test. Let's put that to the test and don't trust anything from the Russian side. And you want to make your own eastern flank much stronger. If you want to do these contracts and have these more missiles, it would take so many years just to bring us back up to where we were. 5 to 8 years, depending on who you want to talk to, just to return to where we were in 2022, and much less to have enough to actually sustain a war of attrition against Russia. So it seems irrational or illogical to consider that if we did that's going to enable us to have a war with Russia in 3 to 5 years, like Mark Rutte wants to say. But let's just hope that he's just using that fear-mongering just to get more weapons contracts or whatever for his side. I don't like it. I don't think it's a good idea. But right now, I'd take that over anything else, because as soon as we get this war over with, then the quicker we'll be able to validate that Russia doesn't want to invade the rest of Europe, and that they're not going to do that. And then we have a chance to actually get back into some sort of normalcy, and the risk of nuclear war goes way down. That's what we need to be doing. We'll see what's going to happen. We're going to continue to follow that. And as always, as events unfold, you can count on Daniel Davis Deep Dive to bring those to you, because we are unintimidated and uncompromised to bring you the truth you need, which is what we're going to do this afternoon when Netanyahu and Trump have some conversations and make some statements about what is being said. There's a lot of complicated and contradictory statements coming out of both Israel and the United States. We'll see where that ends up. Because Trump is apparently trying to talk Netanyahu into a 21-point peace process to end the war in Gaza. But Netanyahu, at least on American television yesterday, still keeps pushing back on that. Don't think he really wants a peace to end it in anything less than the expulsion of all the Palestinian people by whatever means. But we'll see. We'll see what happens when they actually talk and when they come out. Hopefully by that time we'll have some public statements for you. But in any case, we'll analyze that for you then. Thank you very much, folks. We'll see you at 3 o'clock this afternoon on Daniel Davis Deep Dive.